Hey family, how you doing? I'm your brother Mtima Radi. Peace to you, peace to your home, peace to your family, peace to your community, peace to your ancestry, peace to my community, peace to my ancestry, and peace to the nation that you, I, and they are building. Peace also to the Godic forces, the great spirit above, mother below. This is Mtima Radi, y'all. Mtima Radi, soul lightning. 1 second, family. Alright, so I'm back. I want to start off today by talking about a question that I had on another video. Not my own, actually. Well, technically, okay, so the question wasn't to me. It was to the person who put out the original video. And I actually answered it. And the person's response to my answer was, what book tells you this? And my response to him, or basically from, that point was, look, astro-travel told me this. The question that he posed was about heaven and hell. Now, I don't reference heaven and hell very often. And I don't reference it very often because the concept that we have of heaven and hell is so skewed away from what heaven and hell actually is that referencing it, even contextually, with everything that I'm about to tell you that I've learned from astro traveling there, particularly to hell, that programming that we have sustained over the last, X amount of hundreds of years wants to reject what I'm about to say. Now, look, I'm going to be straight with you. When it comes to the hell concept, I was first made aware of what hell really was when I read Sylvia Browne's book. I think she has a book literally on heaven and hell. Maybe, maybe not. But I know one of her books talks about hell. And when she talked about it and she described it, I realized that I'd been there before. That I had actually been to the gates of this place in hopes of securing the release of somebody who was there. However, because of, again, the programming, I doubted what my intuition told me. So I asked the ancestors if they could take me to hell. And I'm going to describe it in a moment. They told me at the time, they were like, you're not ready for that. You're not strong enough for that. But we promise you this. You follow what we said for you to do. It'll get you ready for it. And as soon as you are ready for it, we got you. We'll take you there. But you're not ready for it yet. So what is hell? Dante is correct. There are levels of hell. But what essentially hell is human created. Hell is created by the mentalities of advanced beings. Because advanced beings are given the capacity, and this is something that has really evolved and changed throughout the growth and expansion and solidification of this galaxy and this universe, this yum, as I've called it before. As we have grown, again, this is a yum, this universe, as they call it, UVM, yum, is its mandate is free will. You use your free will. In the Milky Way, particularly the Milky Way, and with the planet that we live on, Earth, free will is magnified. We are able to access God's willpower, which is innate in us anyway. But this is really the first place throughout the entire that thing we call a universe. In reality, this galaxy is a universe because the dynamics that exist here don't necessarily apply to other galaxies. Anyway, um, we are given access to God's willpower, which again resides in all of us. Um, but as time has evolved, we have been able to use more and more and more and more of it, which has caused the potential for construction and destruction to accelerate and to expand. So, one second, fam. All right, I'm back. So, with that potential being on us, so also is the potential to reject God. And particularly, it's not about rejecting God, it's about rejecting the God spark within us and what that mandates. It's about rejecting our soul. Not every entity that exists on this level has a soul. People do have the capacity to have a soul. That is the gift of being here. But not every entity has a soul. If you go through your life and you don't have a soul, and when you complete life you don't have a soul, you are mandated to go one of two places. To recycle back in, meaning you don't get a rest, or to go to hell. What is hell? Again, multiple layers, but what it ultimately boils down to is a darkness, a place where God doesn't exist. A place where God doesn't exist. And at the edge of that place is a opening that enables an entity, once they surrender themselves to what we would call despair, but it's deeper than despair. Once they do that, that opening swallows them up and they become reemerged and resubmerged into the universal consciousness. They lose their autonomy. They lose their capacity to grow and become something greater. It is possible down the line, as time evolves, that they will be given another chance. But when they do finally give in to despair, that's what happens. They go in there. When I talk about the levels of hell, I'm talking about the levels of rejection of that spark. So at the deepest level, which is where I went, people have completely given up on God. They've completely given up on the God spark. They are wallowing in this place of utter detachment. There are special entities, powerful, lit, illuminated entities that go into that place and encourage those lost beings, because they don't have souls, to say something in the effect of, I love God. I cherish God. I accept God. Because that then draws to them a soul, and that immediately disqualifies them from being there. They get out. On the edge of the hell complex, because at the higher level of hell, the higher levels multiple of hell, you are torturing yourself from things that you have done. You're trying to learn how not to do those things again. And those cycles only last so long before you get pulled into another life to demonstrate that you have learned what you should have learned. There is, on that, in those levels, there is a place where beings get reoriented to life on the planet, and really life throughout the universe. They are taught, or at least there is an attempt to teach them how to live better, so they can then come down here and prove themselves, so that they can go out into the world, or they can go out into the galaxy and what have you, and do greater works. The problem is most of the people who end up on the hell side, because look, if you've been paying attention to my videos for a long time, you'd realize that what I just described sounds awfully familiar to what goes on in the ancestral realm, which is the heavenly realm. The reason, though, people end up on the hell side is because of the fundamental rejection of that divine spark. They're no longer connected to God. And even when they get their soul back, or they get a soul back, that doesn't necessarily automatically mean that they're connected to God. That means the potential is there. The soul is a trans-dimensional, intradimensional portal field that is both comprised of God particles. Now you may say, but wait a minute, you just said they don't have the God particle. When I say God particles, I'm talking about this entity, this energy, not entity, this energy that pours through everything in the upper realms. So it takes that, it takes solar particles or strands, it takes what we call dark matter strands. And by the way, there's multiple different types of dark matter. These guys are just dealing with one or two of them. There's hundreds of dark matter particles. It takes that, and it takes what is often called the water of life throughout this UVM, this universe. And it combines all of that. When a person gets the soul, and it is crafted just for them, the God spark becomes anchored into it. The God spark becomes anchored into it. And this spark is not, it's not something, how can I say this? It's not something that is similar to what gave that entity breath and life in the beginning. It's different than that. It what we would call vibrates differently. It calls to the universe differently. It draws itself to the universe differently. There is an instructability within it that speaks to the entire entity, the entire being, that is massively different than what is given upon first being birthed from God. It is not the same as what is called the main being, M-A-N-E. That is what it almost looks like an elongated strand of light from the Most High, which, by the way, that light can be adjusted downward or upward depending on the growth of the being. But it does overlay it. It does overlay it, and not completely, but it does overlay it and expand outward. The soul is often that thing which we see that mirrors this, that mirrors our physical entity, our physical being. It is a memory capturing record of what has been accomplished and not accomplished. And the reason why it is so beneficial to have, especially by evil forces, is because if you have the soul of an individual, you have part of their free will structure, and you can actually use that to drain the life force of the main being. You can also use it to do harm on this realm. So there's a lot of people who have sold their souls and barely escaped with their lives, and they went back to the upper realms, and they have been unable to come back here because it has so destabilized them. It has made them so unstable when their main being was fitted for a new incarnation, that if they had come down here, it might have destabilized things that needed to occur. Whereas there's other entities that have sold their soul, and even though it costs them a lot in the immediate sense, in the long run, it costs them nothing because they hadn't accomplished enough. But that soul could then be used to do harm. See, because on the other side, they have to produce their own souls, and they can't because they don't have the formula to do it, nor do they have the capacity to reach into the human structure to draw out some of the aspects that the ancestral realm uses to produce these souls. So what the other side does is they buy souls, which they use, or, and this is more likely, they utilize the fact that the planet's soul gives every entity who is birthed here a spirit. Spirit is different than a soul. Spirit is more rooted to the planet. You could take it with you, and a lot of people do, but it's more rooted to the planet. They use that to their advantage, and they use the spirit as the soul. And therefore they can interact with other people's spirit, because when you're down here, you wear your soul and you wear your spirit. They can interact with people's spirit. They can also interact with people's life force, because that spirit communicates with the life force. It communicates with the spirit. So, so they buy souls to ensure that they can do damage and more damage on this level. I met somebody actually a couple of years ago, and I was wondering, I'm like, this person is really weird. Because when they smiled, you can see the demon inside of them. I mean, it was uncanny. Like, you could just see the demon inside of them. But I was like, this person acts like they got a soul. How can they have a soul when they're a demon? I've met demons who, you look in a person and it's like, ooh, okay, that person's definitely demonic. But they have a spirit, so there's something that pushes you off of them. This person, who was not in what we call a fallen angel, which a fallen angel, who goes to that other side, they can come into life as a human being, and they'll have their full divine body, so they can actually mimic us very well, do a lot of damage doing so. But she wasn't that, and it was a woman. I've met men like this too, but this is one of the most frequent, one of the most recent ones. It wasn't until I think it was like 3 years into knowing her, because I hadn't wanted to believe that she was evil, because I was like, she has a soul. I don't understand it. But then the ancestors were like, you'll understand someday. But yeah, she does have a soul. The question is, how'd she get it? Well, she's one of them people, one of them entities that came from that side, who borrowed somebody's soul and came in. Now, and this is very important, especially when you're talking about borrowing people's soul. There's a strand of Christianity, and it was very much on display during the imperialist days. There's a strand of Christianity where they say you have to open up your heart to Jesus. They didn't want people to open up their heart to Jesus because they was trying to give something good to them. They wanted them to open up their heart to Jesus so they could take their soul. There was this one story of this Aztec king or something of the other, and he had been rejecting Christianity hardcore. And they had the Spanish army had come through and slaughtered a whole bunch of his people, and they threatened him, look, either you accept it or you die. So he finally said, okay, I accept Jesus into my heart, blah 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 blah. And they turned to him, and this fear crossed his face because he could see them, and they cut off his head. They wanted access to the soul, not only so they could take it and utilize it later, but even worse than that. Once they have access to your heart, they have access to everybody who you know. Everybody. Because that's where all the connections are. And so that demon, Christ, that they were sending around the world, has nothing to do with the one who actually might have existed. This is a creative force of demonic possession. Will go through the heart, spread out, and capture people. Why then, if this is happening, why would a person want to go to hell and rescue some of these entities? Because not only is it people who have rejected God, and not only is it people who have rejected their God spark that gets caught, particularly in those lower realms, but it's also people who have either sold their soul or had their soul captured. Right now, the ancestors, and this has been going on for several years, and really it's been going on for several decades, and to an extent it was going on in the late 1800s. But right now, the ancestors are working double time and overtime plus double time and times double time to rescue people who are getting ensnared in drug use, because a lot of the drug use is attracting these entities that are attaching to people on an etheric level, and they're just pulling their energy down and threatening their souls. So as soon as these people are dying, because half the time these folks don't know that they could call on the ancestors for the aid that they need because they're strung out, and that's because there's all of these entities crowding them. As soon as they die, the ancestors are swooping in to pick them up and to carry them in their soul home, because these entities want their soul. Why? A change in the sun is occurring. Now, I don't have all the details, but the magnetic field of the sun is changing, and that in turn is changing the magnetic draw of the planet. A lot of these entities that have gotten away with living here and being able to do damage here, no more. No more. This new change is going to literally dissolve them and force them off of this planet. And they feel it and they know it. And they know it. The ancestors gave me a vision of this a couple of years back, and I didn't know what I was seeing. I know it now. Imagine being struck in the head by a bumblebee, but the bumblebee doesn't stay on the outside. It's like right here, boom. The bumblebee don't stay there. It quickly burrows into the head. And you're done. That's what this new wave of energy is doing here. It is cleaning house. It is cleaning house. And they know it. And they know it. So, on the heaven side, there ain't really much to talk about, except for to say that there is, when we talk about ancestors rising in power, and that's really what we need to be starting to say to our ancestors is rise in power. I dropped this on somebody's chat a couple of months back. Rise in power. When we talk about rising in power, not rest in peace, there's no such thing as resting in peace. The reason Europeans say rest in peace is because a lot of these spirit-based entities that don't have the capacity, apologetic family, that don't have the capacity to resurrect themselves to the higher realms. They actually, until the body decomposes, they are trapped. They get trapped in their coffins. They get trapped below. Now, that's not to say that's every European. That's not to say that that's every African. No, they get trapped. And it is only a percentage of them. But because if you don't have a soul and they don't have the initiation rites to pull you out of your body so that you can go onward, you're as soon as that heart stops, you are trapped. You're experiencing everything that body is experiencing. And look, having talked to enough white folks who are like, yeah, I just believe it all ends at the end. There is, after some time, an entity that comes through in the graveyard and pulls the spirits out of the bodies and says, we're going to move you on to another incarnation. I don't know how that stuff works. The ancestors haven't let me in on that. But that is something that you need to be aware of. So with rising in power, the first level of heaven, the ancestral realm, that we go to is pretty much what we might call, like reorientation. You get healed up. You get to be whole again. Now, some of us don't need that, but some of us do. You get to look at your life, and you get to look at what you did right, what you did wrong, and then, hey, now I can either go up or I can stay here for a minute. There's some people, and I had a friend like this who was really pissed off that he died. He stayed on that first level for like the first 2 years. He didn't move for the first 2 years. He kept coming back and forth. This is why also, this is also where souls who you keep feeling very strongly around you after they've passed, it's because they haven't detached from Earth. They're going from this first level back to earth all the time. That's why you still feel them. And you may get very, very overwhelmed and sad when they do that, because they haven't cleansed themselves of the earthly emotional bonds which they had here. So it does you no good. Robin Williams did a really interesting movie kind of on this topic. Um, oh, what was it? What was it? What was it? I can see it. I can see it, but I can't think of the name right now. Yeah, I can't think of the name right now. Anyway. So that's the first level. Um, the first level also serves as a staging ground for some people who are getting ready to come into life. So dual purpose. It is the first level, which kind of has like a couple of subsections to it, but it is the most comparable to Earth of all the levels. Of all the levels. Now, I'm not going to go through all the levels, but that's the most comparable one. When people talk about seeing the light before they die or when they get close to death, usually that light at the end of it, oh, well, there's a tunnel and I'm running towards the end of it and I can see kind of this circle. You're seeing into that area that you're going, that first level. That's also the place where you most likely will astro travel to. The second level is where major preparations for work here get done. That's also where you find a lot of the angels. Um, that's where your soul groups are doing a lot of interstellar things, going from not only this planet but other seed planets, things like that. A lot of education happening there. It's very powerful. The third level is where, and I really don't know how to describe this because it's weird. It's still work that happens here, but it's almost like you're doing more manipulation with time and access to dimensions and things like that. So I'm going to stop there because it gets a little abstract and it's not as important as those first two levels. What though you need to understand, well, among everything I just talked about, is that from a heaven standpoint, from a spirit-based standpoint, if your soul is strong enough, and my older brother, who you guys all know, I talked about his passing away, his spirit was strong enough. When your spirit and your soul is strong enough, and your main being is in tune with that, you go right past this first level. You go right to the second or third level. And he literally did that. Like his body. So with my older brother, when he passed away, he had a stroke in 2018. By all accounts, he should have died. I remember reading him when I went up to see him because they had told me he was in such dire straits, he might pass away within the next couple of days. When I read for him, it's like, yeah, his life should come to an end. But when I really read for him, he was like, I ain't leaving. Nope. I ain't leaving. And so I did a quick blessing ritual for him, let him do his thing, and he was there. But his body couldn't sustain him anymore. His body couldn't sustain him anymore because his body, and this is something that you have to realize, your body has a clock. And that clock has a date that is definite when it's definitely going to cease being. And that date is impacted by what you do to your body. So when people are like, oh, well, you've shaved years off of your life, yeah, you can do that. Your body may, upon your birth, have a clock that says, I'm going to live to be 103. you doing the things you do, by the time you're 35, that 103 could be down to 73. Or in some cases, 63. Or in some cases, 110. Because of what you did. My brother, his body, 58 years old when he first came out the womb. 58, because of issues with his nervous system. 58, he was going to live till. He died at 47, if memory serves me correctly. Yeah. Actually, I think he was just shy of his 47th birthday. Anyway, not important. Anyway, he decided that he was going to stick around. And he did. But his body, because of how hard of a life he had lived, because of the neurological problems that he had, his body pretty much gave out on him when he was 44. But his energy, his soul, his spirit, his main being kept that body going. Kept it going for nearly 2 years. Until finally, the body, that clock that had been running on overtime said, no, done. It's out. You got to get out. I'm done. I ain't living no more. And that's exactly what happened. My brother returned to the second level within 24 hours of him dying and came back to visit us. I will never forget it. I was in my apartment, meditating on the rituals that had to get done to kind of help ease the emotional tension of him leaving. And I felt him on my right side. And I didn't feel the emotional stuff that I usually feel when I come across somebody who had recently died who appears. And he was like, yeah, man, I went home already, seen mom and dad, and I come back now. Damn, okay, cool, awesome, love it. Didn't know it was going to be like that, but you do you. And I could feel the strength of who he was. So, all of this is important. And even more so is we have to really understand that hell is not a place to be afraid of. It's not a place to be afraid of unless there is no way for us to escape going there. And contrary to popular beliefs, there's always ways to escape going there. You just gotta do what you gotta do. Always. So, give me a minute. Let me make sure I haven't forgot anything. I did forget something. And it doesn't actually technically have to do with heaven and hell, but it does have to do with dimensions. Somebody asked some time ago, might have even been a couple of years ago now, about dreamscapes and about where do all of these images come from that we have in our dreams. And, the first thing that I want to say about that, and I don't know if I'm going to really get into it that much, but, understand, most of us, when we come here, when I say most, I mean really most of us have dozens, many times, hundreds of lifetimes on other planets. So when we come here and we sleep, our mind takes us back to some of those places. In some instances, our mind will not take us back to them, but will allow our souls to astral project to those places. You ever had one of those nights where you had a really vivid, powerful dream where you don't know any of the people in it, but you know whatever's happening is real, and then you wake up the next morning and you're like, wow, I felt more comfortable there than I do here, and I kind of feel tired, like I've been doing stuff, but I slept throughout the night. Well, that's because you astral projected to wherever you went to. I had a dream like that some years back. I may tell y'all about it. But even beyond that, there is this place, and the ancestors told me about this back in 2000 and actually, I think Sylvia Brown first hipped me to this, but the ancestors expanded on it rather quickly and dramatically. So I learned about it, I think, in 2006, maybe late 2005. By 2007, I had been there and I understood it, and I understood its significance. So there is this place, there is this, what we would call a dimension, where our minds project creations. And we each have a place where our projections go. Now, contrary to popular beliefs, this is not just some blank space where everything goes. No. It's actually it's a landscape. It's huge. It's like Jupiter times 20, but it's a landscape. And when we dream and we need a stage to project that dream onto, we go there. We go there. Simple as that. But most of the dreams we are having are cut out from our past experiences, and then they're just projected onto the stages that we have access to on the in that realm. I'll give you a, I was gonna say a good example of that, but I had this dream that I was gonna talk about, and it just right from my mind. So now the thing is, do we have access when we're not sleeping to this realm? Yes, we do. You just have to learn how to access it. How do you access it? That's not something I really can talk about here. But it's not as hard as you think, and it's not as easy as you hope. You know. So this really is a place that it's built for you, and it's built by you. And I think that'll be it. I think that'll be it. Excuse me. Yeah, I think that'll be it. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, I'm hoping you have questions on this, family. I'm hoping you have questions on this because I want to hear from you on this. Please put them down below. Don't forget, both of these things came from questions. Yes, it took me a long time to get the one, particularly the one on the Dreamscape, but they both came from questions, and that is how serious I take your questions. Questions, comments, concerns below. I'm your brother Vladimir Dees. Peace.